I scheduled a meeting for my secretary to sit down and talk to them, and it was after that point that my secretary, she informs me, she says, you know what, I think he might be one of these big wigs from St. Louis. One of these big wigs who works at Synod, and it had to do with his email. It says LCMS at the end of his email. So I was curious, and I'm like, okay. So I looked him up online, like, what's going on? And it turned out he is one of these big wigs from Synod.
Big, I don't know about the rest of it.
But let me tell you, you would never know that, because when I sat down with John and Lori, I found that both of these individuals are very down-to-earth people. And John, getting to share with me some of the work that he does, connecting people, connecting resources for the proclamation of the gospel, both here in America and around the world. This is John's passion. And I am so delighted for him to be able to share this with you this evening. John, he has been serving our church body now for about 24 years as a senior mission advocate at the LCMS. And he uses his gifts for people and his gifts for connecting people for the sake of supporting mission. Again, both here, nationally in the U.S. and around the world. And he's going to share with us tonight some things that our church body, the LCMS, is doing. And so would you please join me in welcoming my friend, John.
Thank you. Well, thanks, Pastor. I'm truly not a big wig. This is my 25th year, April 5th will be my work anniversary. But I started out here in Michigan years ago. I grew up in Midland. I was a member of St. John's Midland, and my most favorite pastor in the whole wide world, next to Pastor Flanick, was my confirmation pastor, Louis Koki, who has been called home to the Lord. And he was an epitome of what I would call an LCMS pastor. Very humble, probably the most introverted person I'd ever seen. He always had his hands in his pocket and his head down, and he walked like this. But he knew every person in our congregation. He would call you by name. And that always struck with me. I said, how does this guy know that? But he was awesome. And that helped form me into going to Concordia Ann Arbor. My wife and I both are graduates of Concordia Ann Arbor. My wife served for 28 years as a Lutheran school teacher, but she's been retired now for probably the last 6 years, and she gets to play grandma. That's why we moved back to Michigan. I've been down in St. Louis for the past 7 years. I was the Associate Executive Director for Mission Advancement, and I managed all the field staff that went out and did presentations and connected people to ministry. But a lot of family things happened. We lost both sets of our parents last year. My grandkids, who were like this, are now like this. And we woke up one morning and said, we're missing way too much. So I asked my supervisor, Mark Hoffman, if I could come back to Michigan and go back to being a senior mission advocate, where I go out and do this. I love visiting with God's people, hearing your stories, finding out why you do what you do in support of the church, and then hopefully connecting you to those things that you're most passionate about. And I've been doing this since July. We found our Savior because my wife and I moved to Gladwin. And we just love it there. And we found our Savior. We came here, and of course, Pastor Flanick, after a couple conversations, we just knew that this was going to be where we were going to come to worship. And then a lot of conversations happened, and then here I am. But I wanted to give you that background of who I am. I am a Michigander, born and raised, and then God moves through each one of us at different times in different places in different situations. But we try to connect as much as we can, not only to the world, but to our local district here in Michigan. I do Michigan, Indiana, Ohio, Kentucky, and Florida, and wherever else they need me to go. And we got a lot of young people in there, so I get pulled to travel and help train. But that's who I am. Now I'm going to kind of skip around through this a little bit because I'm only going to have a few minutes, but I want to get to some things here. First, I want to say thank you, because this is probably the most important thing that we can do as the church. We can thank you for your faithful support of the church, your local church. Mission starts in your backyard. I used to talk to people all the time, and they'd say, well, John, I want to go to the Dominican to do mission work. I said, why is that? Well, it's nice down there. And then I take them on a trip, and they think we're going on the Europeanized coastal line. That's not where we go. We actually go into the country where God's work is being done by our missionaries. And there is a set of missionaries down in Puerto Rico right now that are from Michigan, James and Crystal Neuendorf, who are near dear friends of mine. When I was the vice president of advancement for Concordia back in the early 2000s, Crystal actually worked for me in the advancement office, so I've got a special place for those folks. But they're doing great work down there. But they're from Michigan, so a lot of great things come out of this state, out of this district, out of our local congregations. People are serving and telling the story of Jesus Christ. And so I just say thank you. Thank you for attending our Lutheran churches. Thank you for believing in Jesus Christ. And thank you for raising your children up in the faith. Because that is so important to what we do. We want our children and our grandchildren and generations well beyond us to be in heaven with us because they know Jesus Christ. So thank you. Okay, the first thing I'm going to say is, you guys know what synod is. Synod means walking together. That's what we do. A lot of people, when I do presentations, they'll ask me, what is the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod? Well, that's your local congregation. And how things work through the synod start here in your backyard, like here in our Savior. The mission here is our community. What are we doing to foster the community here at our Savior? And then beyond that is our district, which is the Michigan district. And the Michigan district is either the first or second largest district in the country. There's 35 districts in the United States. And Michigan has always been a pillar. And then how that happens, then we have 35 districts that form the synod. And the district office is to really do the state. How do we plant churches, grow schools, encourage pastors here in Michigan, and then they do mission work beyond that as well. But then the synod where I work, our initial charge or charter was to send missionaries, but it's grown from that. We have all kinds of programs and things, and I'll get to that as we go. This is the mission statement of the church, but I'm going to get to the thing that's really quick. The Lutheran Church Missouri Synod's mission, now I got to put my glasses on. The mission is to make known the love of Jesus Christ within our churches, communities, and the world. And then as we go through that, we have our 7 mission priorities. And then those 7 mission priorities are pretty significant, but the ones that I like to highlight are the first one: we plant and sustain churches, and we do that in cooperation here in the United States with our districts. And in national missions, we have a grant program, and I believe right now there's $2 million on it. And districts can partner with local congregations in their district to write grants back to the synod. And I think at this point you can get up to $50,000 to $75,000 to help plan a church. So if your congregations or your pastors are interested in planning a church that you know needs to be somewhere, there are resources available through the synod, but you got to apply through them in partnership with the district. Because we just don't come in and say, well, I think we're going to plant 3 churches in Michigan. Because that's not our charge. We cooperate with the district office, with President Davis, and we say, hey, here's some opportunities, what do you think? And then there's grant opportunities that they can get resources to help you do that work. And so that's a pretty big one. The other one is to perform human care in close proximity to the Word of God and the Gospel. So this is probably the gold standard of the LCMS. And you see this all over the place. If you're on our website or you get mailings, disaster response. Like when Hurricane Helene went through and wiped out Florida and all the way up through the Gulf Coast, all the way up through the East Coast, we have WORD teams, which are Lutheran emergency response teams. We train people all over the country on behalf of the districts, local congregations. We teach them. We probably have the only chainsaw manual that's this thick in the country. And it has Bible and biblical passages through that whole book that will talk about how to properly use a chainsaw, but also how to properly talk to people about the gospel when they're doing that work. Because the number one expense that's out there when disasters happen, it's usually tree removal. Because most of you may or may not be aware of this, but like where I live, and even in other places, If a tree falls down and lands on your house, it's typically not covered. Unless you have some type of a rider on your policy that will do that. If a tree falls down and lands on your church, it's the same thing, or out in the parking lot or someplace. We have people that will come in, cut it up, move it, and get rid of it, and it costs you $0. That's our volunteer network through our alert teams. So those are all available resources to you. And if you'd like more information, you can come and talk to me about that. I'll share a little bit more as we go on. I'm going to jump through this kind of quick. Like I said, we got about 20 minutes. This is the world with the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. We are in 90 countries around the world. We have seminaries all over. President Harrison travels, and I call him Matt, and I try not to do that out in public like this, but Matt's been my friend for over 30 years. I started with Matt when he was the executive director for World Relief and Human Care, and I've been with him ever since. He is gone about 8.5 months out of the year. Everybody thinks all he does is sit in his office. It's not true. He goes to district conventions. He's got exegetical responsibilities all over the world where he's going out and talking with missionaries, church leaders, church partners, that he has to go around and do all kinds of stuff for that. And he is probably like 4 years older than me, but you would think the energy level that he has when he's out and about, it's unbelievable. He travels and does a lot of good work. This is your world and the work that you do. And the reason I say that is, as LCMS members, it's not my work. It's our work together. It's your work. It's my work. This is what we do in 90 countries around the world. We plant churches, we show mercy, and we provide theological education all over the place. We have seminaries. I know Pastor Flanagan, he has agreed to go with me to Africa in April, and he's going to get to see some of the mission work, but he's also going to be our chaplain for our missionaries. Okay, LCMS International Missions. Spreading the gospel, planting churches, and showing mercy. Now, I've seen this firsthand, and it's amazing. And it's funny that it took me, when I first started doing this, it took me a trip to the Dominican Republic to open my eyes. Because I don't know about you, but I've sat on my back deck many a time with my neighbors, having a good Lutheran beverage, and having conversations about the Lions, the Pistons, how's your kids, how's my kids. But you know what we never talk about? What church do you go to? Do you know Jesus? And it always puzzled me. But I go to the Dominican, and I'm down there on a mercy trip. I took 20 people with me from different states, and we were doing this work, and we were sitting at a medical center that we makeshift set up, and I had a cooler of water, and it was hot. And so I grabbed a bottle of water, and I started to drink it, and there was a lady sitting outside with about 5 kids, and she was looking at me like, that's water. And I went, oh, so I went back in, I grabbed some water, and I handed it to him. And she asked me, why did you give me water? And I paused for a second, and I thought, well, I was drinking one, and I thought I'd share with you. And I turned around, and I went, oh, wait a minute, that's the wrong answer. So I went back to her, and I said, can I really share with you why I gave you water? But because I'm in a human need, she was there for medical care for her children, and herself probably, and she was thirsty. But I meant a human need. I gave her a bottle of water. Now her ears went like this. I'm ready to listen. But before that, all she heard was, I need help, and I'm thirsty. She wasn't ready to see the gospel. And I told her, I said, the reason I gave you water was because where I come from, every day, my thirst is quenched. And the thirst that's quenched in me is that I'm never thirsty and I'm never hungry. Because my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, fills that void. And she said, who's Jesus? And I was able to tell her about Jesus because I gave her a bottle of water. And so when I came home, I told my wife, I said, something happened. And she said, what's that? I said, I went all the way to Dominican and learned how to do evangelism. I don't understand how that happened, because I've been here in the States all these years, and I've never done that, and I don't know why. So now we make a point of it. We moved to Gladwin, and I know that Jim and Beth Daniels next door to us go to a Presbyterian church. I know that Ron and Pat are Lutherans, and they go to a church someplace up in Roscommon where their son goes. But I would have never known that if I wouldn't have had them over to the house and saying, hey, we go to our Savior Lutheran in Gladwin, where do you guys go? And then all of a sudden the conversations are different. And our relationship with these folks has been great just because of that. And so I would encourage you, when you're thinking about mission work and that, you don't have to go very far to do it. You can open up your back door and go talk to your neighbor, because that will help move you even farther out, beyond your community, to the district, to the synod, to the world. Like I said, we're in 90 countries around the world. We do all kinds of work. This is our African team. Shalom Trump is in the top left corner. He is our regional director. He is awesome. I'm the liaison for African for the synod, so I know everything about Africa. Well, I think I try to. But I've known Shalom for a long time. And by far, in my opinion, he's probably our best regional director. But I'm biased. Shalom and I are good friends. He's got a wonderful family. They've got lots of kids. And I've been over to Africa 3 or 4 times now, going again this April. But the work that they do is phenomenal. Now, what you might think is, well, what are they doing? Well, they're planting churches, they're sharing the gospel, and they're showing mercy. And they do this all over. And one of the ministries that you guys all agreed to through your pastor's support and your offering is going to go to help Christ Care for Kids in Kenya. And that's one of our programs over there. It's called Project 24. We have 9 facilities now, 9 schools that are all over Kenya. The last one was built, you'll see a picture of it here in a minute, in Wamba. And that's part in relationship to our partnership with the Evangelical Lutheran Church of Kenya. And this is the groundbreaking work where we actually went up and bought it. Now, this has been in the works for 2 years, because in Kenya, you don't own the property. We had to make an agreement with the diocese. The diocese has to purchase it. They've got to get government approval, and this is a long, drawn-out process. And then we provide the resources to build the building. Now, I'll show you a picture of what they look like. That's finished. Now, you and I look at that, it's a block building, and we're like, yeah, it's a nice building. But over there, that's the Crystal Cathedral, because you'll be hard-pressed to drive anywhere in Wamba where you'll find a facility like that. Most of them live in huts outside of the city. Most of them don't have a lot of money. But what happens is, with the Christ Care for Kids in Kenya, it's an orphan program. Their definition of orphan is different than what we have here. And I'll give you an example of that. Britt and Micah Odemba are missionaries, and she's in charge of Project 24 and CCK. Micah is from Kenya. And I said, so tell me about this orphan problem that's going on over in Kenya, because there's about 3 million of them. And he said, well, we have 126 in our family. And I was like, what? He goes, well, yeah, my clan is 1,400. Now, the first thing that went through my mind was, how's your mom? And he said, well, our clan is my mom and dad. His dad passed, so now he's the leader of the clan, and he's my age. But the next oldest boy takes over. But he's got aunts, uncles, grandparents, cousins, nephews, nieces, and he's got about 126 kids where mom and dad aren't present. But the clan takes care of them. They bounce from house to house, maybe get 1 meal a day. They have a place to sleep at night. But most of the time they can't go to school, because every school internationally is tuition-based. And most of the families over there, they don't have enough money to send their kids to school, let alone taking a relative's kid and then trying to fund them to go to school. And it costs $1,081 to sponsor a kid for the year, That puts them in one of our schools. We have a 96% graduation rate out of the 8th grade, and those kids go on to high school. That's phenomenal. And then, because if they don't pass the entrance exam, they don't go to high school. They go back out to the bush. And they're sheep herders or whatever they do out in the wilderness. They have to pass to get in. We have 96% success rate. That's phenomenal. And the greatest thing about it is, they learn about Jesus every single day. Every year they have a catechol, which is all of the Project 24 schools come together in one location, and they do plays, songs, dancing, storytelling about the Bible and the catechism. And they compete with one another to see who knows the most about Jesus. And you would be surprised. I went over there, and I was in Lancashire, and these kids stood up. And the one, they thought it was funny because I was in my late 50s, because most time they're not that old. And then they asked me what I drink, because they do chai, which is either goat milk or cow milk with tea. And if any of you know me, that's not gonna fly. But when you're over there, you have to drink it. If you're visiting with a figure of the church, if you don't, it's rude, and then the meetings are over. And I said, well, where I come from, we drink all kinds of things. We drink coffee. Some people drink tea, but I'm a Diet Coke drinker. And Bishop Lincolnshaw looked at me and he goes, you drink Diet Coke for breakfast? And I said, sometimes. And all the kids busted up laughing. I thought, what's so funny? They just never heard of it, because a 6-pack of Diet Coke over there is $1,100 of their monetary system. That's how much each family makes for the month. And they think it's funny that I'm spending that much money to buy Diet Coke. How do you live? How do you pay your bills? Well, it's a little different where I come from. And so it was just interesting. But these kids stood up and recited the whole first quarter of the catechism without even looking at it. They sang me 2 hymns. And I thought to myself, I wonder how many of us could do that. I mean, it's amazing the instruction that goes on. And the greatest thing about that are all those kids, when they go back to their clans, because they go back twice a year for a couple weeks, because we want them to keep their identity. Because if they're gone too long, the clan doesn't recognize them. So they go back home and they become little missionaries. They go home and they tell their family about Jesus. And we see wonderful things happening where missionaries get a chance to go into that clan and talk about Jesus. It's phenomenal to work. This is a great program that's over there. We have water projects where we sometimes we drill wells like this. Sometimes it's not feasible because it's just too much money. So we purchase trucks of water and we take it to a community where they're at and we pass out water, because it's just easier to do than to try to drill a well. Because sometimes you drill a well and then you've got to make sure people are caring for it, making sure it's functional and using it so it doesn't go bad. And sometimes they go bad and you got to start all over, and it's it costs lots of money to do that. LWML, like the ladies group back here that provided us a meal, we think the women in the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod are special. I don't know else how to say it. But LWML provides between $2 and $4 million of funding to the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod Mission Project every single year. And all you young ladies that are out there, I encourage you to join up, because you not only support financial support, but you learn a ton about the church. You get involved in ministry. You stay connected to the faith. It's a wonderful organization. I would encourage you all to be part of it. Women. This is our Latin America team. I went too far. I have to go back one. Theirs is a little bit bigger. Ted Cray is our regional director down there. You'll see Kristen and Pastor Neuendorf right in the middle. Crystal has the red shirt on, and James has a black shirt and collar. He's right here in the middle. Those folks are from Michigan. James's dad, Pastor Don, was my pastor for 15 years when we were in Ann Arbor at St. Paul. They're just a great family, and James and Crystal are wonderful missionaries. And rest assured, when the work they do, what's amazing there is when they got down to Puerto Rico, that's right about the time the disaster, the tornadoes and the hurricane went through and wiped out a lot of Puerto Rico. James and Crystal took it upon themselves to go help a senior complex move people out, care for them, make sure they were safe. And lo and behold, who recognized that? The Puerto Rican government, the local officials. They contacted James, and they had James come into the meeting, and they started asking him questions. Why are you doing this? What's this all about? And now, anytime anything happens in Puerto Rico, you know who's at the table? James. He leads spiritual guidance through the whole country. And they're planting churches. And they're sharing the love of Christ. And they do mercy work. They're just phenomenal, the energy they have. This is a church in Honduras we planted. And it's funny because people think, well, when we plant a church overseas, what does it look like? Well, they typically look like ours. Sometimes they look like this building. Sometimes they look like a pole barn with walls this high, no windows, no nothing, and a tin roof. It just depends. But they planted a church here. They had 100 and some people that came to the opening service, and then they celebrated with cake. Sounds kind of familiar, doesn't it? Kind of like what we do, good Lutherans. But the thing that I find amazing about this is I was down in Haiti, and we were down there doing work when the hurricanes went through there, and Pastor Marky Kessa and Jock Mel had a church, and we went there, and there was probably 2,000 people there, but the walls were this high, no windows, it was a pole barn with a tin roof. It was standing room only. I couldn't even sit in the church. I stood outside with the other people, and there were 6, 7 deep all the way around it. And I'm sitting there going, what's this all about? They sang 4 hymns, 4 stanzas, no hymnals. Pastor Kessa, after the church service, I approached him. I said, hey, Pastor Marky, tell me, you guys need a bigger church? You need to plant another one? He goes, no. He goes, you don't do that here. I said, why is that? He said, see that pole across the street? And there's this pole that goes probably as high as the building here. And it's got different colors wrapped around it. He goes, that's the voodoo priest. See him standing right there? He stands there all day on Sundays when we're worshiping. Did you notice the people here? Did they pay any attention to him? I said, no, they didn't. He goes, that's right, because now they know that Christ is their leader. He is their father. They don't really care what he does. But he goes, when we first started here, all the people that were in here were out there looking at us going like this. And then they would take a couple steps. And then they would listen a little bit more. And then he would go out and visit with people. He said, our culture down here, people listen. They want to make sure you're legitimate. They want to make sure you're not that. And then they come. And they had a boys choir down there, 15 members in it. It would rival any choir we had here. They were phenomenal singers. I said, Pastor, how long did it take you to get these folks to know 4 stanzas? He goes, every week we learn a hymn and we just sing it. And then on Sundays, we tell them the hymn and we sing it. I knew 3 of them. I didn't know all the words. And I'm thinking, I wonder how many of us could do that. But it was phenomenal to see. And I'll tell you a story about a donor I visited with in northern Chicago. At that time, he said, John, I can't support Haiti. And I said, well, that's okay. Tell me about that. Why do you say that? He goes, there's witchcraft, voodoo, government's corrupt. It's just, I can't throw money into a black hole. And in my mind, I'm thinking, have you been to New Orleans? Because you can find it all there, too. Have you been to Miami? I mean, I can tell you places in the United States where that stuff goes on. I mean, you go to Ann Arbor, and on any given weekend, you'll find a half a dozen different kind of people standing right downtown with megaphones spewing nonsense. And I said, well, I tell you what, I'm going down to Haiti with a group of people, and I'd like to share a story with you when I come back and see what you think. And I told him that story about that church. He had tears in his eyes. And I said, look, I'm not here to make you feel guilty. But I just want you to recognize that it really doesn't matter what we do. Whether you give or go or send someone to go, if Jesus wants a church in Haiti, it will happen. I've seen it all over the place. Where how did you get a church here? I mean, we have a Lutheran school library in Vietnam. How does that happen? It's a communist country. But in Hanoi, we have a school. And we have the only library in that region that is a Lutheran library. Every book that's in there is Christian. How does that happen? I tell you how. God wanted it there. And it happened. He moved and opened the doors to make it happen. That's what you do. That's what your district does. That's what the other 35 districts do. When you walk in partnership with us, walk together, providing resources, pastors, theologians, teachers. When we can send them, God opens doors. This is the New and Norths down in Puerto Rico doing mercy work and communion. I gotta put my glasses on, I can't see that small. And one of the things that happened in the convention last summer was the convention of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, which I call the Owners Convention, because there's 6,000 congregations across the United States. That is the Synod, 35 districts. So when people say, well, why isn't the Synod doing anything? And I'm like, well, let's understand what's Synod. That's you, that's me, that's our congregations and our districts. We're all Synod. And what they did here at the convention was they said, we're going to go ahead and do forums. And what a forum is, it's an opportunity, and that's just the language for it, it's an opportunity to be plugged into ministry. Because God bless our churches, God bless our people in the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. When people come over and say, we need a church, South Africa. Great. What do? Handful of churches get together, they go over there and plant a church. But is that what South Africa needed? I don't know. Because it's not part of it wasn't part of the strategic plan of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod to plant a church there at that time. And so what I try to encourage people to do, have you talked with Shaman Trump? Have you talked with the executive director or any board member from the international mission of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod? Because that's our charge. Our charge is to send missionaries, plant churches, do mercy work all over the world. And God, a story like this happened in Uganda. We had a handful of churches, 2 districts. They went over and they built us a seminary in Uganda. It was never part of our strategic plan to have a seminary there. But it cost the Synod $500,000 a year to operate it. Because now that it's built, in order to keep any type of opportunity to continue a partnership with that country and that church body, we can't walk away. So now we have a seminary in Uganda that we have missionaries that we send there, and we help the operating costs. So I always tell people, plug in. Find out what your district's doing. Find out what your synod's doing, because what you want to do is probably already an opportunity for you to jump in. That's part of the strategic plan to help do this. Because we can do things so much better when we work together than when we part and piece it. And that's what the forum is. And if you want more information on that, because we can line you up with strategic planning, regional directors, partner churches, all the things you need to do so you feel comfortable and confident to do the mission work. And what happens at forums? This is pretty cool. You get an opportunity to go to the mission field, if you'd like to. You get to go over and meet missionaries. You get to see mission projects and programs and what's going on. And some of them are pretty cool. Pastor's going to be able to see Tanzania with me in Shingwana, where we have an albino school that a church in Indiana had started to help support the kids with albinoism, because in Tanzania, that's probably the #1 country in the world where albinoism is reckoned. I mean, it's the highest populated area. but they use those kids as human sacrifices because their skin is different, and they look at it as, oh, that's got to be a sacrifice, so this doesn't happen. We don't want it to continue to grow in our country. And it's sad, because they're still a special child of God. And so we have a school in Tijuana where right now we have 45 kids that are between newborn and 4 years old. They're protected. And you know the greatest thing about that? They learn about Jesus every single day. They hear messages about it. The people that are caring for them love them and treat them as a child of God. And so that's just wonderful things. But now we took that part over because this congregation in Indiana said, hey, we can't fund it anymore. It's too much work. Well, we can't let it go, so now it's part of the synod. And we're operating it now. But you'll get a chance to see that. It's just a wonderful ministry. But you have an opportunity too. If you're part of a foro that's connected to Tanzania, I can say, hey, you guys want to go? There's an opportunity. They're doing this kind of a retreat there. They need VBS help. They need pastors. We sent Don Neuendorf over to Sudan twice. My pastor at St. Paul Ann Arbor before he retired to teach classes in our seminaries in the Sudan. And we can make those things happen and connect you to the ministry so you can actually see the work being done internationally. You get to tell them. The greatest thing you get to do is talk to people about Jesus. It's a wonderful thing. And like I said, when I was in the Dominican and I had to give someone a bottle of water to do what I should have been doing my whole life, it just changes you. You get to see things that you normally don't get to see. And you get to realize how blessed we are here in this country. I know we talked about this earlier, where we take things for granted, like water. I can go home and turn my sink on and drink water, take a shower. I can come here and know that if I drink that lemonade or drink out of the bubbler over there, I'm not going to get sick. But some of these places, I have to ask one of the missionaries before we go out to a site, hey, we got to go to the shopping center because I got to get either some Diet Coke or some water for the day because we're going to be out all day. Because most of the stuff that you're going to drink out in the field, you'll get sick. And I've seen it happen. We had a pastor with us, and we specifically told him, hey, don't drink the water. You know, and if you shower, make sure you keep your face out of it. Don't ingest the water. Well, he did. He spent 3 days in the latrine. And we were giving him medications to slow it down. But you just don't want that to happen. It's not fun. And so we make sure those types of things don't happen. And we just make sure that you're safe when you go. This is mission opportunities. Mark Raby, I'll go to the next slide here. Mark Raby is our recruiting director. If you want to be a missionary, short-term, long-term, career missionary, if you want to just go over for 2 weeks, lead a VBS or something, Mark Raby's the guy you got to talk to. Mark was great. He served a number of years in Ethiopia as one of our missionaries. This man is sharp, and he loves the mission field. And he's our recruiter. So I can connect you to him if you're interested, because there's a lot of opportunities to serve internationally right now to go out there. We have, the thing that I always say about the LCMS is we have a lot of folks my age and older, and a lot of them are retiring, and we need to replace them. We need to get new people out in the field. So if you're interested, or you know someone that's interested, have them contact me. I've got my business cards over here, and we can have conversations, and I can connect them to people. Office of National Missions. There's our regions and all the districts. Making disciples for life. That had been our theme for a lot of years. It still is. But what we're trying to do is really encourage evangelism, church growth, everything right here in the United States, because we want to make sure that we're making disciples for life here in the United States. We evangelize the lost, retain the faithful, strengthen congregations, and plant churches and schools. Then I just listed a whole bunch. These are all the things that the Synod does. And I'll talk right here a little bit about disaster response, seeing sign right there. I usually don't wear them, Mike, because people tell me normally that I talk about. But anyways, disaster response is an incredible effort that the LCMS does. And I say it's a gold standard for us because I've seen this happen. When Katrina went through, how many of you remember when Katrina went through down Louisiana? Now, a lot of people at that time would talk to me and say, oh, John, you must have been just coming out of your seat, $28 million raised. And I'm like, yeah, okay. I said, but you want to know the most staggering figure that we had? We had 3,800 volunteers that came from all over the United States that went down to Camp Restore and helped put people's lives back together. That was more important than the money. And I'll tell you a story. I was down there with a group of people, and we had a young man, Marty. He was from the state of Washington, 22, 23 years old. We were all, at that time, in our 40s. And we were out cleaning Mary, who was a shut-in, lived in a double wide, had a carport. And we were cleaning her yard, power washing her mobile home, putting the 2 poles back up on her carport. And I'm sitting there power washing the house, and I'm talking to the guy next to me, and I said, can you believe that we swim in the Gulf? He goes, why? All this came from there. And we cleaned her whole yard up, we got the garbage taken out, moved some trees. And the whole time we were lifting heavy stuff, we kept saying, where's Marty? He's 22, he could lift the stuff by himself. And we go in when we were all done, and there's Marty, sitting at the kitchen table with Mary, having lemonade and chocolate chip cookies. And the sinful nature of us are looking at Marty like this. Like, what are you doing there, young man? And then Mary said the most profound thing. She said, thank you for allowing this young man to sit here and pray with me and let me tell my story. I'm a shut-in. Nobody comes and talks to me. And I had all this bottled up, and this young man just sat here and talked to me. And he listened. And he prayed with me. And she goes, I can't believe that a guy from the state of Washington came all the way down here to help me. She goes, I'm so glad I'm part of the church. I see that happen all the time. Sometimes we give money to help. Sometimes we give flood buckets with stuff in it to help mop up water, basement stuff. Sometimes we cut trees down. Sometimes we just go and give hugs. Because that's what people need sometimes. They just need someone to give them a hug and say, we love you. Christ loves you. Just like the wildfires. My wife and I were watching the news this morning before we came to church, and there was a family who were Catholic, and they were able to get back to their house. Their house was gone. The only thing that was still there was the statue of Mary. And they gathered with their children and 2 of their neighbors and held hands, and they sang praises to God. And her comment to the reporter who was interviewing about this, she said, I'm just grateful that we're okay and that God took care of my family. This is just stuff. I thank God for all the years that he let us be here in this place and host families to come learn about Jesus. My wife and I looked at that and almost started crying. We're like, oh my gosh, does she get it? Does she get that message? That it's just stuff. The most important thing was her relationship with Christ. And that's what we try to do. And that's why disaster response, in my opinion, in the Synod, is probably one of our gold standards, because that's what we do. We go out and connect people to Christ. We love them, we care for them, and we help them. Sometimes we can't put their house back up, but they know they're loved. And we may give them a debit card so they can go stay a couple nights in a hotel until they figure things out. Or we give them some food or some water, but we help them. And one thing I can tell you is this, is we're the last ones to go. We're typically not the first ones to come in, because we can't. We have to wait for governments to open doors up for us to come in, local and community police and fire, to make sure wires are cleared, because we don't want to send teams of people in and potentially get hurt. But we're always the last ones to leave. We still have people that go down to Camp Restore in Louisiana. We still have people that are serving on the East Coast. We still have people that are in Hawaii when the fire burned half of Maui. And it's not that we have people over there giving money, because what Maui needed was pastoral care. They needed people to go over and counsel the victims of the places where their houses and they lost everything and they just were mentally just disturbed and they needed someone to talk to. And so we work with the California District, California, Nevada, and Hawaii District, and we help supply them the resources to go out and do that work. And here's pictures of this. Giving hugs, listening to stories, more hugs, praying, supplies, and then our alert teams. And if anybody's interested, this is really a phenomenal thing because it's volunteer work. We send teams, alert teams out all over the place, and we help people do a lot of great things, so they just enjoy it. And then we have QR codes if you want to go into that. We have grant programs, I talked about that. If you're interested in planning churches, I know the grant program that we have right now, I think there's about $2 million left in that fund, but you can get up to $50,000 to $75,000 to help plan a church. But I would highly suggest you talk with your district, your pastor, your circuit, to make sure that that's what they're doing. Because every district's going to have strategic plans on how they do this. And President Davis is a great guy, easy to work with. I've known him a long time. When I was a VP at Concordia Ann Arbor, he was one of our region members, and he's easy to talk with. You can connect pretty easily with them. Our RSOs, Recognized Service Organizations, we have these organizations all over the United States. How many of you here have heard about the dogs that come out, the comfort dogs? That they're out of Chicago. They're a recognized service organization with the LCMS. We send them grants, we help them as much as we can. Then we have special spiritual care ministry, stewardship ministry, witness and outreach. I mean, these are all ministry areas in there. The other one that I'm going to talk to you about here, this is probably one of the most important things. 2 years ago, we had 572 openings across the United States. Pastors, teachers, DCEs, deaconesses. We only graduated a total from our seminaries and all our concordias, total 272 church workers. We left 50% of those vacancies vacant. We didn't have enough people to serve. Set apart to serve, Dr. Jim Bonnick is our Executive Director of Pastoral Education in St. Louis. He heads this up. He works closely with our seminaries and all our concordias, all our districts. We have mentorship programs. We have pilot programs all over the United States where we take some of our brightest and best, like Pastor Clater, and we make sure that we put people next to them to encourage them and walk with them. I'm an anomaly in my family that I'm a church worker. I grew up in Midland. My whole family worked at Dow. I'm the only one in my family that ever went to college. Because when I graduated high school in Midland High, and I told my dad I wanted to go to Concordia to be a Lutheran school teacher, he looked at me and goes, "Why do you want to do that?" He goes, "That's not what our family does. We go work for Dow." He goes, "You're going to have a good life. You'll make 6 figures. You get a skilled trade. You can retire 25, 55, you're out. You get a pension. You got a 401k. Why do you want to do that?" And I said, "Well, Dad, I don't want to work in Dow. This is what I want to do." He said, "Oh, good luck." And that was okay. Now, I love my dad. He was the best dad that anybody could ever have. He taught me so much how to be a man, how to take care of my family, and he was faithful to God. He was a member, an elder at St. John's. He rebuilt their boiler there 4 times. But he understood typically what happens when you become a church worker. You don't have a lot of money, and it's hard to take care of a family and have a house and a car and do all the things that he was accustomed to doing. So I went to Concordia anyways, and I became a church worker. Greatest job I've ever had in my life. I've done a lot of things. But doing this, I get to talk to people about their faith. I get to find out when they were baptized, how old their kids are when they were baptized, when they were confirmed. You want to talk about some phenomenal stories? Listen to people in the church and see what they tell you. You just get I get goosebumps sometimes when I walk out of people's homes. And getting back to that, there was nobody there like we have today that would have come along my dad and said, hey, Walt, we think your son would be a great Lutheran school teacher. Let us help you. They came and talked to me, but they didn't talk to my mom and dad. And that's what Set Apart to Serve is doing. If you know people who want to be full-time church workers, pastor, we need pastors. I mean, I love Pastor Flanagan. I told him when I came here, I said, usually I'll drive by churches. And if there's no cars in the parking lot, I keep driving. If I go on Sunday and at 11 o'clock, parking lot's empty, nothing's going on, I keep going. But when I came here, the parking lot was full, activity going on, and I seen Pastor Flanagan, I talked with him, and I listened to what he's doing in the community. He goes, John, I want to build community. I want to do these things. I want this to happen and this to happen. And I thought, okay, I can be a part of this. Because mission doesn't happen overseas. Mission happens right here. And we need good pastors, like Pastor Adam, that understand we have to proclaim the gospel. We have to build community in our community. That means you got to be present. And that's what we do. I'm here, I'm present. I tell people all the time, if you need anything, call me. My phone's open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Now, if it's 3 in the morning, I probably won't answer until the next day. Or if I'm on an airplane, I'll call you within 24 hours. But you have to be present. Because what I find in my life, if I call somebody and they don't answer, if I want something and they don't answer and I've called 4 or 5 times, I'm probably going to look somewhere else. If I have to click 22 times on the internet to find something, probably done with that one. I'm going to find some place where I can click once. I'm not techie. I would rather do this. And so we got to make sure that we're grooming young people to come up in the church that know how to do this and be present, so that we can encourage them to be pastors, teachers, DCEs, directors of church. I mean, we need those people in our church because they're the ones that are spiritually feeding us. And so I would encourage all of you, if you know a young man or a young woman in your church, that you see them doing things, and you think, you know what, I think that kid could be a pastor. I think that young lady could be a deaconess. Go talk to them about it. If you're not sure, talk to your pastor. Give me a call. I'll gladly talk to them and say, hey, let's have a conversation. Maybe open that door, because we need those folks in our seminaries and in our Concordias. But I've got a pamphlet. There's pamphlets up here on all this information. But I would encourage you to take one and look at it, because there's a great opportunity there to get involved. And then I've got QR codes if you want those. I can surely give them to you. National missions. Places where you can find all this information that come out. If you don't have them, let me know and I can make sure you get them. Lutheran Witness, the Reporter, and the Engage magazine. The Reporter and the Lutheran Witness are pretty theological. If you want the stories, the feel-good stuff, go to the Engage magazine. We have stories in there from all over the country. You can go on to KFUO Radio. KFUO Radio, they do podcasts, Christian music. You can hear the International Center down in St. Louis is 10 o'clock devotions every day. You can hear me on there periodically, because sometimes they interview me and I get on there. I had a piece on there about Set Apart to Serve. And so there's lots of opportunity there. Without my glasses, I'm pretty blind. Okay. And then Mary, she's the fundraiser for KFUO, and she can connect you to that. They celebrated 100 years last year, This is amazing because Walter Meyer started the Christian radio broadcast way back in the 40s and 50s. And everybody thinks, we have the Lutheran Center for Religious Liberties now out in D.C. where we combat all kinds of stuff so that we can keep our freedoms to worship. Pastor Tolman down in Heartland has Voice in the Public Square. And if you have an opportunity to go down and see one of his programs where he brings people in from all over the country, I've been to a number of them. They're wonderful. They debate what's causing things that people could persecute the church. And they have open debates. And I'm telling you what, it's phenomenal. But anyways, KFUO Radio with Walter Meyer, he started this. He actually started this, and they had a place in D.C. back in the 70s to make sure Christian broadcasting was all over. That's why you have Christian radio on Christian TV and all that. That was a Lutheran that started all that. And then mission advancement, that's me. We have Blessed to be a Blessing, which is our development work for setting up Christian estate plans. It's no cost to you. The only thing that we ask you to do is remember something in the synod or the district that you live in your estate plan. And we come in and help you do the work. It doesn't cost you a thing. All of the work that we do in the synod is done by voluntary giving. This is how it used to look way back in the day. The districts would provide this much of our resources. Today, they provide this much. And there's a lot of reasons why. That's why they have folks like me that come out. In my office, we raise between $38 and $48 million every year to help the $68, $70 million operating budget of the Synod, to send missionaries and do all that work. But the districts are phenomenal. Michigan's one of them. They're one of our highest, most active districts out of the 35. So you should be thankful that Michigan district is wonderful. We love it. And remember, we seek the fruit from what you do. All of the lives that come to know Jesus, that's what we're after. We want to make sure people know Jesus. So I'd say thank you. If you have any questions, I don't know how much time, maybe 5 minutes. Is there any questions? People want to know anything? That was pretty fast.
Where the greatest number of church plants, new church plants take place? What continent?
Right now we have,
Can you repeat the question?
yeah, the greatest number of church plants. Right now we have one in Vegas. We have 3 in the Mountain West, Montana, Wyoming area. But like, again, and I think we have 2 in Carolina. The biggest thing we have with that, I think we have one in Indianapolis too. The thing with that is we just don't come into districts and say, hey, we're going to start planting churches. That's not our charge. Where we go to plant churches is because districts have come and said to us, hey, we've got opportunities to plant some churches. Can we partner with you? They will receive a grant from us, and we will help fund them with the resources they need to get it going. We have people that will come out and work with them, teach them how to do it. But it can happen anywhere. It really takes local congregations and districts to get together and collaborate and open the door for the resources in the synod. Any other questions? Well, I'm around, so if you guys want to meet with me one-on-one, if you'd like me to come out to your congregation and do a presentation that's specific to something you're interested in, take one of my business cards, give me a call. I'm always willing to come out and talk. So thank you so much. It was great to
Thank
meet
you so much, John. We're going to close out our evening now. I invite you to stand, and I'm going to invite Pastor Bill Winter forward. We're going to pray together the Lord's Prayer, and he's going to give us a final blessing. Before we all go, though, I'd like to just extend a huge thank you to everyone who was deeply involved in this event, making this happen. Everyone from our Ladies' Aid to our speakers to our Mosh group and all those who gave up their time and their effort to be here and to put this together. With that, I want to hand it over to our current Gladwin Circuit Visitor, Bill Winter.
Let's join together in the prayer which our Lord has taught us. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever. As you heard, we have a lot of mission work to do out there, and we can all do it. Pray God's blessings on your congregations and on my fellow brothers in ministry, and to Timothy Sheridan at St. Luke's in Harrison, who will be the new circuit visitor for the Timberline Circuit coming in October. So God's blessings, Timothy. Gladwin Circuit. Oh, used to be. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine on you and be gracious unto you. The Lord look upon you with favor and give you peace, give you safe travels.
Thank you so much for coming. Blessings on your night.
Don't drive too fast, just slap him in the head.
Be careful on your way home.
Yeah, you too. Serious stuff. Okay? Give me a call. Text me.
Yes, I got to.
Text me